Hello, everyone. Welcome to Practicing Life podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Pitzer. Today, I have a guest with me, Sarah Miller, and I'm going to introduce her. She is a 40-something, highly sensitive mom living in United Kingdom. And she has done many past roles in her life, including marketing, a personal stylist, interior designer. But I have her on the show today as an author. She has written a book called Permission to Be Fucking Happy. We all want that. So I have her here to discuss her journey and her story. Now, her story is very similar to mine. You know how I feel about this. So I'm very excited to have another soul sister here. Um, across the world, I seem to have a lot of people in United Kingdom. I must have lived there at one point in a different future or life. But anyway, Sarah went through a divorce and she left an abusive marriage. She had two young children, and all during that time, she was kind of suffering from a chronic illness or multiple illnesses. And she just had all of these financial constraints to overcome. And so she wrote this book so that other people like you that are listening, my heartfelt seekers, can take whatever circumstances that you are facing and kind of learn from Sarah. And this is what my podcast is all about, being able to take life lessons and be able to see the silver lining in them and the gold in them. And Sarah is here and she has written this book, and we're going to dive into it because she knows what it takes to be happy and to overcome those challenges. She's been through it, and now she's here to share her knowledge and her experience so that you too may find the happiness within. So welcome, Sarah, to my podcast. I am so happy to have you.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
And I will dive right in. So as you know, I like to ask everybody kind of like, what's your story? So wherever you'd like to take us, we're here to listen.
I think after that intro and kind of listening to what you were saying, it's so amazing that when I had kind of my big life change, that I thought I was very alone in it. And I think that's been the really big part of my story, is actually leaving my marriage was like it was almost easy because it was so hard. There's no way I could have stayed. I was so ill. My husband made it very easy for me to walk away in the end because he was so horrible to me. And I think that makes it a lot easier. But it didn't make the aftermath any easier. And I think probably I traversed that very much on my own. And like you say, with chronic illnesses, with two very young children who were 1 and 4. And when I left, I chose to leave what looked like a very beautiful life. We lived in an enormous like barn conversion in the countryside in England. We had expensive cars. We went on expensive holidays. He was very handsome. My children are beautiful. We had a lovely dog. It couldn't have been more idyllic. And I think that was really what piqued me of when I left, was so many people have said to me, how could you leave such a beautiful life? How could you do that? And trying to explain to them that it looked so beautiful on the outside, but there was no happiness within it, and how selfish I felt that I was for not being happy in that environment. And so then I was obsessed afterwards to find out what true happiness means, because if my idol was what everybody thinks is happiness, and yet I was still unhappy within that, was there something broken within me, or was it actually that's just my truth? And that's where I learned about living in integrity with myself, and how I'm not financially motivated. I'm very motivated by just being happy and being a nice, honest, authentic person, and how striving for things for the sake of striving for them do not energize me. They just destroy me. And so actually the way that society is built these days is to get everybody to conform and kind of get on the hamster wheel and get in the rat race. And if you're not doing all of that, you're a failure. And I think that I've almost had like a double whammy of I left my marriage and I thought, oh, I'm going to be happy. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm not happy. I've got so many things that I've got to overcome now. Like financially, I was just destroyed, and I had two young children to take care of, and unfortunately, an abusive ex-husband to deal with the whole time, who constantly wanted to knock me off of my feet. And so it wasn't easy. I had to find levels of resilience within myself that I never knew were possible. And I learned so much about the human spirit and so much about mindset and so much about just what environment you need to be able to thrive in life. And actually, I kind of found the equation for happiness, which is like tending to yourself like a garden, effectively, as opposed to doing what everybody tells you is what you should be doing. But in doing so, you have to go against the grain, and there's not a huge amount of support. Although now, having talked to people about my journey and written my book, and then I meet people like you, and then I think there's so many of us going through it. I'm not alone. And I guess it's just been such a big journey to get here, to realize that I'm not alone in it, but I am alone perhaps in being courageous enough to step away from something that didn't fulfill me because I want more fulfillment from life. And that was kind of, yeah, a big like light bulb moment for me.
It is one of those things that you have to separate loneliness from being alone and doing the inner work and making your own choices and having that self-integrity. I mean, those are two different categories that we sometimes blend together.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say from just hearing your story, I think people underestimate the power of self-integrity. And so when you were thinking about back in your relationship when you were together and you were questioning, like, did you question before or only after? Like, is it my own fault that I'm not happy within this marriage while you were in the marriage? Or did you like kind of like just assumed like, okay, if I get out of this marriage, this happiness is going to just show up, it's going to be here. And so you didn't self-reflect until that point?
No, I did start. The thing is, I think this is where the issues began, and this is why I'm such a advocate for happiness, and I'm so evangelical about it now, is that when you stray from your integrity,
Mm-hmm.
you destroy your sense of self-worth because you're going against yourself the whole time. And what happened was, in my marriage, is that we got married and he would ask me if I could lend him money, and it would go against my integrity. You know, I'd be like, I don't really want to do that because it just doesn't feel right to me. But I allowed somebody to get me to overrule my
Mm-hmm.
integrity. I
Mm-hmm.
started doing things that didn't sit right with me, but I did them because they said, you must do this, you should do this, why wouldn't you do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started stepping further and further away from myself, to the point where that I just didn't even know who I was anymore.
Yeah, and you definitely can't be happy in that state.
No, and that's why, I mean, I fell to pieces because I no longer lived in integrity. The first time I did something that was of integrity with myself, then set me on a path of going further out of
Mhm.
integrity with myself, as I tried to make up for the bad decisions that I'd made in the first instance. And so I think when I was within my marriage, it wasn't that I started to self-reflect. I read the teachings of Buddha and things like that. I was like, and then that there must be something. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I be happy? Why can't I just settle down, toe the line, and do what he tells me to do? And that's, that should tell me everything that I needed to know. But it
Yeah.
shouldn't
Just
be
that
something.
question alone, right?
But I obviously hadn't been brought up to understand what healthy relationships look like, what
Mhm.
integrity with yourself meant. And so it was only after post rationalizing the mess that I got into which is what about my book is about, is that every time that you make a decision that isn't in integrity with yourself, you undermine yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to lose confidence in yourself, because instead of being self-assured, you're saying to yourself, no, even though you're telling me not to do this, I'm still going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you just, in the end, my sense of self just checks out. She was like, I told you what to do. You keep on doing the opposite. I'm not going to fucking work for you anymore. So you're on your own and you're screwed. Because I'd
Mm-hmm.
lost all my backbone. I lost all my integrity. I lost all my sense of self. I didn't know who I was. I was just like a version of myself that had no value system anymore, didn't know which direction to turn in, and was just a mess. 2 kids to take care of, and money to earn. I had to start earning money immediately,
Yeah.
and find myself a house and relocate. And like, in a way, it's good. I didn't have time to think about the enormity of the task. My task was so enormous that I just had to get on and do it. Like, I didn't ever have time to think about what the
Mm-hmm.
next thing. But then over time, I just started to look at what other people were doing. I just started looking for answers. I became just like a dog with a bone, like I said, working out what the route to happiness was and how I'd made such a big mistake and how I could rectify the situation again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so now that you're in this and you can look back, I mean, what do you think were the defining moments that you were like, I can't do this anymore? Was it that your chronic illness had gotten so high? Was it how your relationship was with your kids? Was it like, what was the turning point that really was like, this is enough. This is enough. I can't do anymore.
I think it was the realization that we both hated each other. He openly said that he hated me, but he put it on to me. He said, "You hate me, don't you?" And actually, I said, "Yes, I do. I do hate you." And for me, that was enough. I was like, I can't help it. I can't pretend that I don't anymore. And I do not want to demonstrate to my 2 daughters that this is love, that this
Yeah.
is mummy and daddy look like, and this is what a healthy relationship is. Because unless I break this cycle, they will go on to do exactly the same as me. And I'm not having it. I'm not putting my most precious gifts in the world through the pain that I've gone through and then inflicting that further and further down the generations. I was just like, I'm just done with it. I refuse to do this. And I was so ill by then
Mm-hmm.
that I felt like I had the final nail in the coffin. I was just hopeless. I had nothing left. I was really good at and excellent at putting on a brave face. Like, I've obviously grown up just being on a brave face and being a bit of a comedian and just laughing about things and making sure that externally I show up and I look good, but inside I was just like, I'm not going to make it out of this alive. And not that I would have killed myself, just I was just shriveling up inside, and the
Mm-hmm.
stress was so much stress, and he was under so much stress that was then getting pushed onto me. That then I was like, this is why people die, because they die of stress. They die
Yeah.
of stress diseases because I mean, it's just that pressure. It's just like a
Mm-hmm.
boiling pressure, and you just think, this isn't going to go a good way. I'm not going
No.
to get out of this in one piece, and I can't do it. I've got to save myself.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, like for me in hindsight, I didn't realize how much your environment does affect you. And we talked a little bit about this and just that whole compartmentalizing, like, oh, well, he acts this way, but out in the world, I act this way. I'm a very open, loving person. Everywhere I go, I'm smiling and saying things that make people's day brighter, right? This is me. This is who I am at my core. And it's just like, I didn't think about the fact that, like, when I'm at home and somebody's yelling at me and I'm just absorbing it all, that it was affecting my body. It was affecting my ability to work. It was affecting my relationships with my kids. It was just, I just kept going like, this is normal. Like, and I didn't even stop and think like, you know, just like you are the food that you eat, you are the environment that you're in.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the thing is, I think one thing that really I suppose really spoke to me was he always had very bad backache, really bad backache the whole time. And I got this book called How to Heal Chronic Back Pain or something. And it was all about mindset, and it was all
Mhm.
about stress, and it was about how stress can affect your body. And that's where I
Yeah.
started to learn about all of that. And it really fascinated me. And so then I started learning more and more and more about it. And also because I was so chronically ill, I went to see lots of specialists, and I became obsessed there. I kind of went from one extreme to the other of like complete self-neglect after I had my children, because I'd been very ill before I had my first daughter. I had a vomiting and diarrhea bug. I was in hospital on fluids, and then I gave birth the next day to like a 9 pound 4 baby, so very
Oh,
big
wow.
baby. And I'm quite petite, and nobody took care of me. Like nobody fed me. Oh, I mean, it sounds awful, but
No, I mean,
around nobody fed me, and so I had to feed myself. I could barely move because I'd had an episiotomy and stitches, and
mm,
I couldn't breastfeed because
you
I
didn't
just
have
didn't have
enough nutrition.
nourishment, and I beat myself up. I was like, my children would die if this was back in the day, if they didn't have formula, they would die. And I'm an incapable, I was hysterical. I was absolutely hysterical. And in a way, I mean, I'm trying to forgive myself for that because it's quite painful to think, because I'm so much about food is medicine and nature's my benchmark and all of that stuff. But at the time I had to give the children formula and things like that. So it's just I learned so much about it that then I realized that all of those things have a massive difference. The environment you're in, it either makes you or breaks you. And you can't, like I say, my auntie said to me, that you've got to create wings of steel and just not absorb what other people are saying to you, which
Mhm.
is, I think, fine in general everyday life. But when you live in an environment
Yeah,
where no matter what you do, you're wrong, or
right.
you never know what's going to happen or what the repercussions are going to be, and you tiptoe around and you walk on eggshells, and there is no joy left to be had. It's very hard to put up those wings of steel. I mean, again, I still am like, why couldn't I have been stronger in my mind? Why couldn't I have been stronger to not let his words hurt me? But then I just think, well, I'm not a robot. I'm a human being. And if it were that way, we would all just be in rubbish relationships with people and just go, well, I'm just not going to listen to it. Just not going to listen to anything they say. It's like, you can't be toxically positive about something that is a toxic situation that needs rectifying. And so, yeah, I think I left because I felt hopeless. So I kind of went from the beautiful life but hopeless to the life that was screwed, but I had hope.
Yeah.
The yin and
Yeah.
the yang that were the opposites. And so this one's much better. It's harder, but I have hope, whereas before it was easier, but there was no hope.
Yeah, there are definitely trade-offs with anyone making any decision. And the thing about the situation that you're in now is it's control's an illusion. But the thing is you have so many more choices because in the past relationship, if it was like mine, if it was like a lot of the other ones that I've talked to, your choice was by default eliminated because your environment wasn't safe otherwise. And that's just, like it breaks my heart to think about how long I tolerated like the tiptoeing. Oh,
Mm.
let's not do this because this might make dad angry. Like, let's not do this. Like, we won't bring up this. We won't talk about this. Like, and so when you get into the other side of this and you can be as loud as you want, or you can paint the walls whatever color you want. I mean, that freedom right there,
Yeah.
it does
And I think
wonders.
it's all of that. I managed to get myself a house. We were homeless for a while. It was a real mess, but I found this strength of mind of I'm going to make this happen. Like I did not go through all of that to not make things happen. And like I made things happen out of nowhere. I got us a house out of nowhere and I decorated it. It's pretty much all because we're three girls. It's all pink and happy and joyful and all of the things that we want in there. It's not having to ask somebody about whether I can put things up or display things that maybe I don't want. And maybe that makes me sound like I'm a bit of an intolerant person, but it was just like, I was like, I'm just going to make the most of this now. I'm going to do all of the things that I've ever wanted to do and make this such a a beautiful environment, because I was trained in interior design anyway. I was like, oh, I think
Yeah.
I want to be an interior designer, but it wasn't even that I want to be an interior designer so much. I wanted to create a nourishing environment for myself where, for me, whenever I look around my environment, things just made me happy. It wasn't about them being perfect or the latest things. It was just like, a nice picture that I'd seen that I particularly liked, and plants and just real, just tangible things that made me feel better about myself, not this beautifully laid out environment like a show home. It's quite the opposite. I want it to be just a really warm and inviting environment so that when I am having bad days, I can still sit there and look around and my environment supports me to feel better
Yes,
about myself.
exactly. And the thing about it is like self-love and self-worth are hand in hand with self-expression. So if you can't express yourself the way that you really are and who you are and surround yourself with things like, the nice picture, that's denying yourself self-love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I
it
think
goes,
that's the thing is I became like a Stepford wife. I conformed to how all of the other wives were and
mhm,
to fit in because I wanted to make friends and I wanted to be part of a community. But actually it wasn't me. I was just play acting at being somebody else. And it's taken a long time to throw off that version of myself to get
mhm.
back to the version of me, of who I am before life started to make me conform to fit in. Now I'm like, I want to stand out, but in a way of I don't want to stand out. I'm quite an understated person. Like I want to just have a peaceful life, but I think I stand out more because I don't conform to what everybody else is doing. I don't show up in the same way that everybody else does. I don't do what everybody else is doing because I just do what resonates with me. And I live
Mhm.
very, very intentionally in a way that I want to. I have my goals, I have my thoughts on how I want my life to look and what I want to. For me, it's all about setting an example now to my children. I want to set an example and I uphold that through every aspect of my lifestyle so that I don't have to tell them what to do. I lead by example and
Exactly.
infiltrate them. That's what I'm trying to do, infiltrate them so that they will, it's in conditioning in a way. No, I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to show them that by following your happiness and doing what makes you happy, that's the way to live life, not to try and conform to what society tells you you should be doing. Because like one of the quotes in my book is, what society tells you to do, that's like a safety card. You don't want to follow that safety card. We want to go and live and do all of the crazy stuff, self-express, be the people that we want to be, and see where it takes us, not just live a small life conforming to what everybody else says is the norm, just so that you don't get any grief.
Yeah, I mean it's so interesting because I believe nature is our teacher. And if you
Yeah,
look around at nature, everything is different. All the animals are different, all the trees are different, the flowers are different, like everything is different. Yet we treat like us humans like we all have to be this one protocol, and it just doesn't work. Not
yeah,
everybody is going to be in this career or, have this haircut or
yeah. And I think that's the thing is with my trying to find happiness and kind of trying to find this equation for happiness. I spent all my time of grieving, so well, about 8 years, walking around the fields. I'm so lucky where I live. Nature saved me. I walk around the fields and I run around the fields like every day. And so I watch the seasons change. I watch nature constantly and I just learn from it. And I think I've absorbed it. I would say that I rewilded myself. My cycle then linked up to the moons. You know, I run everything now by seasons, nature. That's how I identify with everything. And with my book, it was like you have to create an environment where happiness thrives. It's not about doing things a certain way. It's about looking at the different aspects of your life and deciding how you want to show up for yourself. Like for me, I realized that it's about your self-image. You have to kind of tally the image of yourself that you know that you can be internally and reflect that externally with your self-expression. And then you become like a whole and you live intentionally towards whatever it is that floats your boat, whatever you're passionate about, and you put your value system in place and create a boundary around you. And then actually it's very, very easy because you live within your own self-imposed boundaries, which is your value system, and you don't have to stray out of it. No matter what anybody else is doing, it's irrelevant because you know what your boundaries are and what your value system is and where you're trying to get to, and you know who you want to be on the way, and so you just let life take you on the journey. I mean, I say that like it's really simplistic. I wrestle with it all the time of trying to take back control. Like, I must control this. I must find a job. I must do this. I must do that. So kind of letting myself breathe and let things happen and
Yeah,
taking life.
I want to pause there too, just because for anybody that's out there and you're in this, situation that your marriage might look really perfect on the outside, but on the inside you're feeling like your self-worth is diminished, or you can't seem to find love within yourself, like, and you're considering leaving. And maybe it is financial constraints, maybe it's other things like where am I going to live that is stopping you from going forward. The thing about crossing over that bridge of fear is when you get to the other side, it's like a miracle happens. Somehow you find a way, like somehow the universe conspires with you and doors open that weren't there before. It's just like things pop up into your life. I can't explain it. I've seen it happen time and time again. It's when you have a desperate need, it's like the universe answers.
Oh gosh, yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing, is that's why I wrote my book really as well, to share the fact that when I left, it was an abyss. There was nothing that I'd blown the ship on my life to a degree of, the ashes were like, it was raining on the ashes. There was nothing left. There was nothing left. And I did not know how on earth I was going to move forward. But I decided who I wanted to be. I decided what my values were. I was very, very strict about it. And then I went towards the things that piqued my interest and I found opportunities. They just literally, like you say, like doors open. Crazy stuff happened. Crazy stuff. I manifested a house pretty much. Like, there's no way in the world I could have bought the house. But I was like, I'm having it. I'm having that house, and I made it happen. So many different things, like mad stuff. So I put lots of examples in my book, things that have happened. But every day, some days I think, do you know what? This is a nightmare. What am I going to do? I need an opportunity. I need something to happen. And literally, I'll get an email out the blue from somebody saying, I've just come across you here, and I was hoping that you'd be able to help me with X, Y, or Z. And all of these things keep happening. Every time I think, oh my God, it's all falling to pieces, something new happens. And the best bit about it is it's always exciting. It's always things that I really want to do that really resonate with me. Like, someone got in touch with me the other day and asked me to work on a project with them. And I had to say to them, like, is this a joke? Because if I could have come up with a dream project, this would be the project that I've written. Like, are you making this up?
And see, and I'm going to relate that back to my audience too, just as a teaching point. Like, this is what happens when you are aligned. This is what happens when you you decide. That word decide is super important, because when you decide, like, it's like the universe knows that you're not messing around, and you start working together with the universe. But I can't tell you how important that self-integrity is, because that is like, it's not just the self-love, that self-integrity is a reflection of self-love. When you love yourself, you keep your word to yourself, you keep your promises to yourself. This is all part of self-love. So when you have that self-love, that self-integrity, it builds self-trust. And then it's like everything just flows to you. That is how you manifest. Like, that is how things come. You don't pretend to make something work for you when it doesn't. You be honest with yourself and you go a different direction. Manifesting is a very powerful tool, but it has its foundations within you.
Yes. And also, this is the thing, is everybody talks about manifesting. Like, you manifest whatever you want. Yes, you can manifest things so long as they are in complete alignment with who you are and what your value system is. And if it isn't, you can't, it's not going to happen. It's not going to get pulled in, because you're just asking for something that actually you don't really want at all. The times when I've manifested the best is when I was absolutely, like you say, decided on something. I was completely 100% certain. And in my head, there was no doubt that it would happen, no doubt whatsoever. And then it would manifest like that. If there's any inkling of doubt in your mind,
I know, it's like everything crumbles.
yes, exactly. And you can't pretend that, though. And I think that's the thing about life, is you can't pretend that you're a certain way to get something. You have to go exactly with your true nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's energy. You can't fool energy, because energy recognizes its own self. So yeah.
Sorry, you just froze a bit there. What did you say?
Oh, I just said you can't fool energy. Energy recognizes itself. So yeah. Well, let's talk
Yeah.
about how you got to the point where you were trusting yourself. Did you ever have issues with it? Or was it just simply once you got to the point that you were integral, everything else, just self-trust just automatically came in for you?
Gosh, actually, sorry, you cut out again on that key moment. Did I always had trust issues? Was that?
Well, I was wondering how, because a lot of people, when they're in your shoes, they are feeling like they can't trust themselves. Did I freeze? Okay.
Again.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Just a little pause.
Technical issue. I think it must be me.
Um, yeah, we'll wrap this up. But if you want to talk about any trust and how you built that, that would be great. And then we'll wrap this episode up and just let everybody know that, you know, Sarah Miller's book, Permission to Be Fucking Happy, it's in the United K. So if you're going to look on Amazon's website, you have to go to the United Kingdom's Amazon website to look it up. There is another writer who has a book similar titled in the US. So please make sure that is there. I will put it in the show notes for you too, to be able to click it and be able to find it. So, because this is, Sarah's blueprint of how she went through low to how she built up to high, how she found happiness. And she has a lot of tools in there to be able to help you be able to apply it to your life and accomplish the same, outcome for yourself. Depending that you do the work and you do the things like keeping self-integrity and showing yourself, allowing yourself to have happiness.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's the thing, is that's how I built my trust in myself, is by deciding to be truly myself, and really refining and refining and refining and refining, like always refining who it is I am and how I show up. And when things don't quite feel right to me, being aware of it and refining back. And so I feel like I'm now getting to the point where I am back to the more refined version of myself, which then allows me to do more, because I'm much more streamlined effectively. Like, my life is so much easier because I trust myself so much more. And I think that's the thing for people. It's very hard to think that you're going to go from here to here And if anyone says to you it's going to be like a linear journey, it really isn't. And it's been 8 years for me, 8 years of ups and downs, and some serious downs, like really terrible times, but also enormous highs that, you know, I haven't experienced before. And also just an underlying complete trust in myself of I am my own certainty. I know who I am, and I
I
know what
love
I
that.
want from life, and I know what I'm giving and what I want to give to people, and I know how I want to go about it. And I just continue to road test and road test and road test and move forward. And that's what life is about. I'm just living. I'm on the adventure, and I'm willing to play the game now, because I know that the universe is not going to let me crash and burn, because it's had plenty of opportunity to.
And I gotta say, I absolutely love that I am my own certainty. So I would love that to be a takeaway for people that are listening. And I also wanted to ask you, like, what's your biggest takeaway now that you've rebuilt your life?
Is to I think the thing is, it is to take the risks, no matter how painful ripping off that plaster is going to be. You have to do it. You know, I've seen people, my auntie died recently. She had waited for retirement to live, and as soon as she retired, she died. And she was so stressed all that time on the way there. And it's just, it really just resonated with me so much that I lived under so much stress and in so much pain. And if she had walked away from that stress and pain sooner, she wouldn't have died. And so I now have decided that I live for all of the other people that don't get to live a full life, who don't get to live all of the years. And I think that's what really my biggest takeaway from life is, that it's not guaranteed. We don't get any guarantees. The only certainty in life is death. And so you have to just go for it, because there is no time to waste. You just don't know what's around the corner. And you either look at that as a positive or a negative. And, you know, it, everything can be seen in both ways, because it's all energy, isn't it? It's all positive and negative. And so I choose to see that as a positive thing. I will live for her because she didn't get to live anymore. So I'm going to throw myself into life and do the most ridiculous things that resonate with me and make me happy, to make up for the fact that she didn't get to do any of that.
Yeah, it's always a shame. Like, I know so many people that have waited to get to retirement to travel, and then they
Yeah.
get to retirement and it's like that's when their body decides like, oh, I can finally relax, and it just all of these things start going wrong and then they can't travel. Oh, I froze. All right, sorry, I saw it
Yeah. I mean,
freeze
I
again. All right. Well, Sarah, I want to thank you for being on my podcast today and sharing your story and allowing others to read your story and to be able to learn from you, because we're all learning from each other all the time. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable and open, and also allowing people to see who you really are. So thank
oh,
you for
thank you so
being.
much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I'll have it in the show notes. Everybody, please go and follow Sarah Miller. She has an Instagram account and she also has her book out. And if you need to reach out to her for any interior design or something along that lines, I'm sure she probably does something still. So,
Yeah.
multi-talented lady.
Any questions? Jack of all trades.
Yeah, isn't it the truth? Well, thank you so much, everyone. I will see you next week, and you matter.